This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, February 10th, 2022. It's the day after Galaxy Unpacked, and I have my good friend Enobong here, Thundery of Booredatwork. Hi, Enobong, how are you?
I am good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been a while.
We need to talk about some Galaxy things today.
Yes,
right?
we do. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you and I both have some of the devices. I have a Galaxy S22 Ultra right here and a Galaxy S22 Plus, a pink one, as a matter of fact, pink and gold. And so I'm reviewing those for Hot Hardware. Those of you who are curious, you'll see a review there in a few days. And they sent you some stuff too, right?
Yes, I got the S22 Ultra, which I have in my hand, and I have the S22 Plus, which Daniel has right now, but both are in the house.
Awesome. So you're pretty much ready to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to start with the Ultra? I saw your video. You did a kind of a first impression video. I thought it was really awesome. A lot of what you said I agree with. So what's your take?
So it's an interesting one because my take is now kind of blended with some of my friends. So I have a lot of friends who are Note users, die-hard Note users.
Right.
And out of 4 of them, one has decided to go from the Note to the S22 Plus instead of the S22 Ultra. And the other 3 are like, yeah, we'll get the Ultra. For me, it feels like that amalgamation of the S line and the Note line, more of a Note than an S. And my buddy said, look, he felt like the design was a bit lazy.
Really? It's interesting because I actually love the kind of pure and clean design. First of all, I'm a huge fan of the Note design language. So If you look at this, really, the best way for me to describe this phone is to say it is a Galaxy Note 20 Ultra with the Galaxy S21 Ultra camera systems and a new aesthetic camera pod design, which I think is really nice and minimalistic and really fits well with this Galaxy Note 20 Ultra design language. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel. It's clean, kind of like the LG Velvet, that kind of like waterfall, teardrop, whatever they call that,
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think those design languages mirror together. I think maybe for some people, it's the idea that they were looking for a different design language change. But to me, this is technically the second or almost third year of this design language from Samsung. So usually it's 3 years before you move on to something else. But I like the design. I like the fact that the S Pen is back. Granted, Samsung didn't really add too many new features to the S Pen. I do like the improved accuracy and sensitivity of the S Pen. It just feels much better.
Oh, yeah. It's much nicer.
It feels much nicer on there. So
I just love it overall. Like, I feel like, it's just, I don't know. There's something like, it's a Note to me. It's just a Note. It just makes me happy.
It's an old friend. That's all. It's an old friend.
I think you're right. I had to pull out my Note 20 Ultra and compare them because I thought this was bigger. I'd forgotten how big they are. Because, I didn't realize I put it also next to my S21 Ultra. And the S21 Ultra is actually smaller. I was like, what? Like, I really didn't think that. I thought they're going to be the same size. And it's actually bigger than an S21 Ultra. And it's bigger than a Pixel 6 Pro, which, as we all know, is a big phone. Mm-hmm. And I don't have an iPhone 13 Pro Max here. But
oh, it's bigger.
Yeah, it is. But I think if you put it side by side with the Note 20 Ultra, they like from the front, you couldn't tell them apart.
No, you can't.
Like even the S Pen in the same slot, I believe, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think for them it was just bringing back some of that, just the memories. Because yesterday there was a lot of excitement, and I could tell, at least from just dealing with some of my followers and commenting, Note users were like, finally, yes, we can buy the device that we love. as opposed to having something like the S21 Ultra, which was a pseudo hybrid of sorts. It was like it kind of can give you the same features, but not really the same.
Yeah, I think it was the right call. Like I always felt like the once they went large with the S series, that there was a redundancy there, and the Ultras, I mean the S Ultras, the 20 and the 21, were kind of redundant. And I mean, it was all created at a time before supply chain issues, and so it does make sense now to kind of put them together. I just wish I'd called it the Note. I think they should have called it the Galaxy S22 Note. Like this would be the merging of the two brands, because the Note brand, I think, is much stronger than the S brand or the Ultra brand.
No, I do agree. I think maybe I agree with that. Maybe they could have called it the Galaxy S22 Ultra N or something like that, because I get the idea where they don't want to bring a brand that they're killing off or putting away, but just giving something that goes like, okay, this is the end. We get it. We understand where it's coming from. But, I think it all depends on what happens with the Galaxy Fold series and what happens there, because Samsung's, thought process is now split in a very different direction, where foldables is one thing, but still a lot of those Note capabilities will be going into foldables as well. So I think it all depends on how they look at those markets as they look at the S line moving forward.
Absolutely. So it's interesting to me that this has the exact same camera system as the S21 Ultra. Like pretty much, I mean, there's obviously software changes, right? And that's fair. But as far as I can tell, paper, it's the same stuff, right? Is it?
No, it's not. It's so the only thing that's the same is the ultra wide. The 108 megapixel sensor it's a different sensor. It's still 108.
It's a newer sensor.
It's a newer sensor. Still 108. The periscopic zoom is also, it's 10x. It's a newer one as well. And
so they've changed that 10 megapixel sensor in the 3 and the 10x zooms.
Yeah, so they've changed those. It's just that they just using a newer version of the same megapixel size.
But so basically, I mean, how can they go wrong at this point? Like, I think this is from my few tests so far, it's been great. And I think it's going to continue being great. But it doesn't seem to be quite as big a change as the S22, which we're going to talk about. Because I think that is a big improvement on paper, at least, right?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think with the 22 and the 22 Plus, because they have the same camera systems, that 50 megapixel jump really was needed, especially for what Samsung does with the imaging. And also, just the whole camera systems there, I think that's a huge improvement.
The fact that they dropped the stupid 64 megapixel 1.1x optical cropped, the sensor BS there, to me, that's like, I always felt like the fan editions had better telephotos than the that 64 megapixel barely zoom crop sensor, and now we're back to a real optical 3x. I think that's good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fan edition got the best of what the Ultra, or at least the model from the year before had. So they always put that in there, and I think this year they really had to come. They almost had to come correct with the S22 and the 22 Plus, just because of how late the fan edition was, number one, and also having a baseline that would compete very well, because Samsung's competition this year is very different. It's not just the iPhone anymore per se. It's all the other Android manufacturers, whether it's Oppo, who we will talk about, and the
rise of Oppo,
and Xiaomi and the rest of them. So I think it's something that they had to go. At least our base has to be very tangible for people to actually move forward with.
I agree 100%. I just say that overall, I'm very happy with the camera systems. I think this is slightly improved. S21 Ultra on the S22 Ultra is great. And definitely big changes that I think were necessary and are going to make a difference on the S22 and S22 Plus. What about the S22 and S22 Plus design? I think there's some interesting things going on there. At first, it just looks kind of like last year with that, camera pod that's very iconic, that is now very Samsung and in people's minds. But if you look closely, for me, what stands out a lot is that this is a flat glass back. There's no more of that kind of rolling the glass back into the edges of the phone. And you have more of like iPhone-like slab edge. I mean, they're round, but not as rounded as anything from Samsung before. And I'm not sure. I've got a pink one, and I don't mind the color pink, as you very well know. But I feel like it's not doing it for me. It just feels. I kind of like the previous design better. I don't know.
I mean, I haven't spent too much time with that just because I've been doing a lot of stuff on the 22 Ultra.
Yeah.
But here was my first impression. So when I held the Ultra, I went, I'm home.
Yeah, it was so good.
Right? It was that. When I held the S22 Plus, I went, huh. Your description is kind of right in the sense that where it felt a little iPhone-ish. But the one thing I will say is that I actually picked up my iPhone right after, and I was like, I prefer the way it felt on the Galaxy still. So it still felt comfortable. I did like because it's a 22 Plus, it was much larger, so I like the size.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things about it is because they didn't change the camera module at the back, it looks stale. And it's really funny because if you look at it from the other side, Apple does this at least for 2-3 years where it stays the same. But Samsung always has to change. Or Samsung has been changing so much that people are used to every Galaxy looks different. Now that you have two Galaxies kind of look the same, everyone's kind of going, this is a bit pale. Like this kind of looks the same.
What I'm very impressed, though, is looking at the front of the S22 and 22 Plus is how little bezel there is on that flat screen and how the curvature is a perfect match between the actual screen curve and the edge, the chassis curve, which, as you know, Xiaomi and a bunch of other Android manufacturers just throw out the window all the time, and it looks so wrong. So it's very Apple in that sense. There's that level of attention to detail that I'm really appreciating. But overall, then, if you look at the sides of it, if you compare it to the S21, the S21's camera pod was completely integrated with the side rails. Mm-hmm. Like it was one piece that molded over. And of course, with the S21 Fan Edition, it's cheaper, so they separate. Like you can see it's a separate part, right? It doesn't blend in. And on this S22 and S22 Plus, I feel that they're cheapening out there because yes, the camera pod is still metal, but it's not the same piece of metal as the frame chassis. So there's a gap there, and it's very, don't get me wrong, this is a beautifully made phone. The fit and finish build quality on these phones, Ultra included, are top notch, but it's Samsung. I expect like Apple levels of perfection here.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, there's nothing I can say in their defense for that, in the sense that the only thing I can think of is because of supply issues, maybe they tweaked the design just a bit to make it easier for them, as opposed to, who knows at this point. But
it's probably manufacturing ease, right? But I just like, it's just, it's a little stuff like that. You're like, I just showed it, by the way, folks. Those of you watching on video can check it out. Remember, folks, there's a Patreon. I'm just squeeze that in here. Patreon.com/TankGirl, Patreon.com/TNKGRL with a bunch of tiers, including a video version of the podcast. You get it before the audio version, and you get it less edited. So more raw, more real.
Yes.
With visuals. So check it out if you haven't yet. But yeah, look, I think overall, I'm happy with these phones. I just like design-wise, language. I think, we can talk about the branding and we can talk about these little details. That's because that's who we are, right? But I think the average person who needs a new Samsung phone right now, because I don't see any S21 people updating to an S22. Maybe the Ultra people, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're kind of early adopter tech savvy. They're like the best and the greatest. But I think people who are maybe on an S20 right now or an S10 right now are going to get like very happy with this phone.
Oh yeah, I just, one of my friends actually just upgraded, and he was asking me about the SD card slot on the S22, and I was like, it's gone.
Ouch.
But he hasn't updated
across the board, folks.
He hasn't updated his device in 2.5 years, almost 3, something like that. So I was like, yeah, sorry, man, it's gotta go for these devices. But I think what it is that this is a very comfortable upgrade for a lot of people. And I think Samsung has created a device that once we see what they have next year in the 23s and the 24s or whatever numbers, we have, it's going to be very drastic. And I think this is the last of that comfortable stage because our industry is one where parity is something that, is cut across the board. So they have to do something different. I think this is their comfortable stage of saying we're going to give the consumers something that they can, carry around and go like, yeah, this is my phone.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think in another direction, in terms of the experience here, I think that I haven't really played it with the OS too much yet because I tend to skin my phones to look like pixels. I mean, not copies of pixels, but I immediately put Nova Launcher on every Samsung phone because there's only one reason. I can't handle scrolling sideways in the app tray. I need to scroll vertically. So I immediately change the launcher and I use, I know it's petty, right? And then I use of course a Gboard as my, so I'm not getting quite the full, new experience that they're bringing on. So I could kind of care less, honestly. I think it's good enough. It's not my flavor. Like I'm much more of a Oxygen, Pixel, Moto, Sony kind of raw, uncluttered stock Android person, but I'm okay. How about you?
I like the Samsung UI more than anything else, just because before Pixel UI got to where it was, Samsung was one of the first people. Remember with CyanogenMod making updates to their UI for all the new features. So I'm kind of used to it right now at this point. But I mean, I think the UI is very fluid. It's fast. It's very responsive. And in terms of changes, I really don't look at that stuff anymore. I just kind of just want to use the phone. But you mentioned something I wanted to ask you. Have you tried Pro Raw yet?
Not yet.
Because I know you mentioned Sony and that, and Raw, and I was like, okay.
Well, I mean, I have tried it on iPhone. I've tried Pro Raw. I love it. I think isn't Samsung bringing something like that to the table here? I thought that was one of the marquee things for the camera, right?
Yeah, there's a Pro Raw here, and there's also you can actually download the app for the S21 Ultra.
Okay.
And use it there as well. So I know a few people who have, and they said it's been pretty good experience. So
I need to test that out on the Samsungs. I've done it on the iPhone. And obviously I think there's some improvements in portrait mode as well, like some sort of AI portrait. You're the portrait guy, so
it is so much better. So this is a joke that Saf and I have had with the Galaxy. So with the S20 Ultra, I love the S20 Ultra's portrait and front-facing camera because it had more contrast, which worked well for my skin tone.
Right.
But if you were lighter than me, it didn't work well. Right. So they changed that in the S21 Ultra. And then when we got this phone, I took a photo and it was a happy medium of both for me. And I remember texting Saf and I said, whoever they fired on the camera team that did the extra contrast, they brought him back and they told him he should just take it easy on the extra contrast on there because it feels really good. They've done a really good job in balancing skin tones much better. There is still some of that softening, but I think I think that is more to do with Samsung's a Korean company. And a lot of companies in the East like the skin softening, even though it's off, you can still tell it's there.
It's still there, yeah.
It's still there. It's not as bad as any other Asian manufacturer, but you can still tell it's a bit there. But the bokeh effect is spot on. It really is spot on this time.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of a camera walk probably tomorrow. So that's like, I haven't really dove into the camera too deep yet. I just kind of assume it's going to be pretty good. But I tend to not try to be wowed too much by these, features they throw at you. I kind of just want to use it and then kind of go, okay, this is what it brings. And then, then I'll go digging in the special stuff. And in terms of hardware specs, what's interesting to me is the displays are absolutely gorgeous as always on both the phones I have. Of course, the Quad HD Ultra is out of this world. It's probably the best display on the planet, wouldn't you say?
It is. I mean, I like the naming because they call it Super AMOLED 2X. And it's funny because I was doing my video now and I mentioned it in the video and I looked at the camera. I was like, I really don't understand what it means, but it looks good. So I'll take the 2X as a double the fun from last year,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call
it's
it.
incredibly nice. I mean, it's like for me particularly, I got the phones yesterday, did a video unboxing. I'm going to publish that. Hopefully by the time you folks listen to the podcast, you'll see a link to both Enobong's first impressions and maybe your gaming video if that's ready by then. And of course my unboxing. But know that I didn't really get a chance to try the phone in daylight until this morning. And it's super sunny and warm in California right now. We're having like a nice little summery spell. And I am always just incredibly amazed at those high nits, this OLED displays and sunlight. It's like night and day, man. I can, ironically saying that it's night and day is funny, but like it is so clear and so good. And this adaptive thing that they've added that really adjusts the contrast and not just the brightness, but the contrast. Oh my God, just in Gmail alone, in direct sunlight, I felt like I was looking at a screen in the shade. Did you notice that?
So you're talking about daylight. For me, it's Gmail at night.
At night, it's good too. But I expected that would be good because that's easy to do, right? It's like unless it's really dim. I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, but see, that's usually my own situation because nobody ever gets it right. It's just always off. So it's the same process, but just for the adverse effect for it. And you're right too. Daytime, it is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of those things where I always expect Samsung to do a good job with the displays in terms of manufacturing the displays, but this is probably one of the best times where they've tuned it to their own devices pretty well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I didn't realize this. Like I had to look at the specs side by side. The S22 and 22 Ultra are like 0.1 inch smaller this year. Turns out. So 6.1 and 6.6, right? Instead of 6.2 and 6.7. I had no idea. I mean, I can't tell. Obviously the Ultra is bigger because it's note size now, which is what, 6.9 or something? It's ridiculous, right?
6.8.
6.8. Yeah, it's just like I put it side by side with my Oppo Find N and I'm like, maybe I don't need the folding phone. Like, I mean, in terms of screen real estate, you're not getting that much more. But the other thing that I find interesting, and this is obviously not an S22 specific thing, but it's interesting how, remember 2 years ago, we were having these conversations and the Galaxy S20 had just come out. And all three of them were Quad HD, even the small one. Mm-hmm. And here we are with 1080p on the S22 and 22 Plus, and of course 1080p on the S21 and 21 Plus last year. I don't think it's a problem. I don't mind. There's plenty of resolution there. But it's interesting how these are the little things that, I think Samsung's learning that it's not just about the specs anymore. Like you can save some money here because nobody's really going to care, I don't think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think for them, the FE was the first thing that helped that because the FE doesn't have a QHD display. It's full HD plus, right?
Right.
And then a lot of the, Asian manufacturers have come in with that full HD plus at a lower price range. So they've come to realize that, as long as they can tune their displays the way they tune, so it always looks good. It doesn't matter at that point because then the consumer is going to go, they all look the same. Now, people like us will go, maybe not. This is a little here and there.
You want to hear something really funny, Enobong? I fired up my S21 Ultra to do the transfer, right? Because I usually do the transfer using Google Cloud, but if you have two identical brand phones, it's generally way easy to use their tools.
Yeah.
So I use their, whatever they call it, the quick transfer tool or whatever. And I'm fired up. And as I'm comparing the settings, I'm making sure that all the settings stuck in the transfer. And I looked through my display settings, and please don't kill me for this, but my S21 Ultra was in full HD mode.
No, I don't blame you. You know why?
I don't know. I didn't even notice. I just used it. At some point I must have done it maybe for battery life or something. Mm-hmm. And then I just forgot.
Yeah, no, so, I hear you on that one. Mine is still on full HD plus.
Okay, so it's not just me. No. Good. But look, my eyes are not that great anyway. It's just, it just shows you how even if you have the ability to go, in this case, completely variable refresh from like 1 hertz to 120, and resolution up to QHD. For me, I'm going to probably stick with the lower res and the higher refresh rate if I've given a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 and gaming performance in one sec. But before we do, let's talk about some things like storage options, power, charging, and stuff. Interestingly, the batteries are small on the S22 and plus this year than last year. I think it's 3,700 on the 22 and 45, I want to say, on the 22 plus. I need to look it up.
I think it's slightly less than 45 because there was some hubbub on that. But I know the 22, you're correct on the 22.
The point is that it's interesting that they made the battery a little smaller. I guess the phones are tiny, slightly smaller too. But most importantly, we have 45 watt charging finally now on the Ultra and the Plus, and 25 watt is probably good enough for the smaller battery on the 22.
Mm-hmm.
And then 15 watt wireless and 4.5 reverse wireless. So it's got all the features except micro SD and a headphone jack, really. I mean, Wi-Fi 6E on the Ultra and the Plus, and then it's just 6 on the 22. And then the other thing that also ultra wideband is missing on the 22. Not that matters unless you have a BMW and you want to use the key feature.
Yeah. I mean, I think those features are all kind of standard approach. The one thing was, of course, always the charging, because it's really funny how Samsung used to be the company that used to spearhead faster charging. And then they were left in the dust by everybody else other than Apple. So it's good to see it's at 45. It's interesting that, and I'm not sure how the pre-orders went, because I think in Europe they had to offer, if you pre-ordered, you get the 45 watt charger as part of like your pre-order package.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but in the US, I know you could select it too, but I'm not sure how it went, because that's the thing that a lot of people have, kind of just messaged me and they're like, what charger should I pick up? Because now I have to get a 45 watt charger and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I charge mine with a Huawei 65 watt laptop charger PD, and it charged really fast. So I think it's a perfectly PD compliant setup that they have here.
Yeah.
I don't think it's using any tricks, which is nice. When you compare it to like all of BBK Group, Vivo, Oppo, OnePlus, Realme are all using their proprietary thing still. Xiaomi is the same way. It's actually worse with BBK because Vivo has a separate system from Realme, Oppo, and OnePlus. They're not compatible. And then Xiaomi has their own thing, and then Huawei has their own thing. PD is PD. Like, I appreciate that Samsung didn't mess around with that. Like, it might not be going full 45 watt PD, but it's definitely, I should put my little watt measuring thing between them, because it was definitely charging very rapidly. I'm pretty sure it was doing 30 or 40 watts with the 65 watt PD.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. I was using the, I got a 100 watt PD charger from, I can't remember the company, but Qualcomm sent it to me last year. I used it, I plugged it in. By the time I looked at it again, it was almost at 100%. So it's fast enough, I think. And I think that's probably a healthy place to stay. There's no need for the crazy numbers. I know a company's coming up with a 120 watt charger very soon.
The Mi 11T Pro.
Yes, has 120.
Or Xiaomi 11T Pro, like what was in September, October, I reviewed for a Geekspin, 120 watt charging. It was insane. 17 minutes, 0 to 100. How to fry your battery.
Yes.
I think they manage it well. It's probably okay. But who needs that? It's nice, yes, but I think anything that gives you a day's full of charge, like, but most phones today are 2-day phones, most of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger ones, right? So the Ultra is 5,000 milliamp hour?
Yeah. Right.
So that's going to last you 2 days of normal use. So if you can get half of that in 15, 20 minutes, I think that's the sweet spot. That's we're talking about somewhere between 30 and 60 watt. So 45 is like smack dab in the middle. Well done, Samsung.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the only thing I can think of is because I'm from Nigeria and we have a lot of power outages over there. And that is where a 120 watt charger makes sense.
Well, yeah, right.
Because you you know that in 15 minutes, in case the power goes out, your phone's fully charged.
You're covered.
Yeah, type of thing.
For sure. We'll talk about Infinix in a minute too, because they're a very popular brand in Africa. I think in Nigeria as well.
Oh yeah,
so.
huge.
So storage, we have 8 gigs of RAM on the 22 and the 20 Plus. We have, I think, 128 or 256 on those, which is fine. I kind of think that without micro SD for the Plus, maybe a 512 would be good for those people who need a little more oomph. But, oh my God, the S22 Ultra up to 1 terabyte, right? Like, it's ridiculous. And up to, 12 gigs of RAM. Wow.
I mean, it's solid. One of the good things, at least they did, I saw yesterday, I heard rumors initially and I thought they weren't going to do it, but they offered the 12 256 at the same price as the 8 112.
Oh, nice.
It's for pre-orders. So I think that was a good thing where at least you could just jump up to the size that everybody needs, if you're pre-ordering the device.
Right now, I'm a happy camper with, I think 256 is my sweet spot. 120 that I can live with. Anything less than that is garbage. But it didn't used to be that way, Do you remember when you had phones with 8 gigs of storage on them?
Don't remind me.
It was weird. Now, I mean, it's funny. It's ironic that we have more cloud storage than ever, right? We have more connectivity than ever. These phones, all 3 of them have millimeter wave 5G. And here we are. Oh, I think I need 512. Yeah, I need 512, right?
Of course, because we never put up to cloud, and
no, we don't delete anything either.
Yeah, and then when you want to check something when you're in a terrible cell area, and then you can't pull it down from the cloud, that's when, of course, you're like, this is just a waste of my time.
100%. So let's talk about the performance, because look, I've played with another Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phone that I've benchmarked that I can't officially talk about right now. So I have some ideas of what to expect in real life. What are you seeing with the S22 Ultra? I haven't run my benchmarks on it yet. I need to run benchmarks for hot hardware. It's not something I'm into, but I did watch your video, which I'll put in the show notes, because I think it's very interesting how you basically used Gamebench and ran a whole bunch of different games. And, take us through this, because I think the takeaway is really interesting.
Yeah, so the first time I ran, where I worked with Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 was the OnePlus 10 Pro. And the performance there is very different from the S22 Ultra. I would say the S22 Ultra has been solid, except one game, which is Genshin Impact, which for some reason it's performing worse than what I did last year. Although I went back to my S21 Ultra, I played the game, and I was getting the same results. So there is something that Snapdragon needs to do to update with the game to make sure that it performs well, because the performance was good. I think they did an update in the game. It is not. The thing I would say, though, is the CPU and GPU usage is very interesting. So because the GPU is improved on 8 Gen 1, you will find GPU usage much higher. And CPU usage has really dropped. Some games have dropped down to like 7%.
Wow.
CPU usage, stuff like that. So it's really taking that, PC approach of you got to have a better GPU, might as well use it to run those games well. The other thing is also battery consumption. So last year, gaming on either the S21 Ultra or even the S21 Plus was fine, but it would suck out your battery.
It would throttle very quickly. I remember that.
This does a much better job. So I spent the whole of yesterday, I spent last night to maybe from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, just playing different games and seeing how it actually performs. I'll just give you a time frame. So I played for 2 hours. I played 3 graphically intensive games in between that period. Now, Gamebench tells me that my battery drain should be between 24% to 35% per hour.
Uh-huh.
So, which means if I'm playing in 2 hours, I should be down to 60% maximum, or so. In 2 hours, I lost about 25 to 30% battery. So
Huh.
it did much better than what I was expecting. And it did much better than what I got last year. And it kind of reminded me of something I saw with Dave 2D, where Dave 2D also had his video and he was saying that
Yeah, I watched that. Yeah.
that it does a better job running the games the way it should be run as opposed to benchmarking the games.
Yeah.
Which is a good
And
place.
also could be the benchmarks, and not optimizing on the new architecture as well. That's the other thing,
True.
We still run at hot hardware some really old like GLES 3.0 and 3.1 benchmarks. And I'm like, why? Because it's almost seems silly because we get better frame rates, but you're not really optimizing for the changes in GPU architecture that have come about. You're not optimizing for all the NPU and AI stuff that's happening in games now. So, it's still a good baseline, but I think it's evolving, and I think you're right. Real life testing is becoming a lot more critical in the same way as I've always felt very strongly about just using a phone and, kind of like, the Kogan way, a day in the life of the Galaxy S22 Ultra. Comes home, we're down at 27%. This is it, normal day for me. And I think it's obviously not very objective because everybody's got a different use pattern, right? And of course, if you're testing a phone, like you were doing games a lot, I was doing lots of photos like Kogan. And it's like, not everybody does that, but I think it gives you a good baseline if you hammer on some way at the thing to see what the battery life is going to be like, right?
That is very true, and I think that's correct because those patterns differ, and also you have the mixture of what am I doing throughout the day. It's the am I checking email in the morning, and by the time I go outside because it's sunny, even though I never take video, this is a great day to take video. Those are the kind of things that we can calculate. But I think most of these devices now are built more for that day-to-day real life. It kind of reminds me of the M1 chip in the sense that the M1 performs very well, but if you really were to look at it as a number cruncher, it's not built that way. It's built to be able to use for a very long, effective amount of time. And that's what I think Qualcomm is trying to do, the same thing where it's giving you a chip that is just more efficient for what you need it to do as opposed to just crunching numbers out there.
Yeah. You're looking at more and a kind of a stretched snapshot rather than looking at let's look at the next 5 minutes of this. Most benchmarks are even less than that. So that's why I like to run the stress test in 3D Mark Wildlife, because I actually get to see how the CPU, throttles down over a period of time. It's a 20-minute long test, and usually at about between 5 and 7 minutes, most processors kind of call it a day and throttle down like a certain percentage, right? And the 888 was pretty bad at that compared to the 865. But so far, again, I don't really have too many data points, but it seems to be okay. But I think this is also highly dependent on how they create the cooling system in the phone, right? So everybody's going to have a different approach. Like, I'm sure that Red Magic is going to make a phone soon and it'll have a fan and it'll be really great at not throttling, right?
Yeah.
Because of it. Yeah. So, look, overall, I'm pretty excited with this. I think it's very evolutionary in many ways, but at the same time, what do you expect? If you talk the OnePlus 10 Pro and it's very evolutionary, right? So, you can't be mad about that, but at the same time, I do wish it was a little more exciting, and I kind of think that's why I'm excited about some of the leaks and rumors that are coming up from Oppo and others, right? Because, for example, in-body stabilization for optics. We haven't seen that yet on any Android phone. I can't wait for that to happen. I want to see that happening.
But no, we do. The Vivo does have in-body.
Oh, you're right. The Vivo, the 70 Pro Plus, right? The X70 Pro. Okay, so that's happened already. But I'm talking about something we can easily get in the US, right?
Yeah.
I'm obviously, I have a feeling that we're going to see more, but it's not going to be something sold here, unfortunately. But True. I kind of want to see more of that happening. I'm a bit bummed that the OnePlus 10 Pro has kind of decreased the performance of its ultra wide and stayed with the same main sensor as last year. I don't know. That seems like a bummer to me, but you have one, I don't, so
I will put it this way. I was disappointed in the device. So as we just mentioned, the S22 Ultra is an evolutionary step. This was almost like de-evolving back. Even though it is slightly better, it's just that the incremental the increase is so minute that it doesn't feel like I'm getting a better device, because rumors are we're getting an Ultra.
Yeah. We talked about that on last week with Joshua on the JV.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it means that what we got was a OnePlus 10, not a OnePlus 10 Pro.
It's more and more looking like that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I hope the pricing, it's really up to the pricing. I'm not unhappy with the 10 Pro being so evolutionary and in some ways degraded. If it costs, like $800 or $750, then it's fine. Like, go for it, right? But let's see what happens. This is the big challenge this year. So speaking of BBK Group, we've got a bunch of stuff. I want to maybe jump into some of the Oppo stuff right now, because I'm curious. I'm getting an Oppo Reno 7 Pro. It's coming. And I want to know what your thoughts are on this, because it's a hot looking little number. And you have one. You did a video. I'll put it up. What do you think?
I mean, it's an interesting device. I personally have lost the taste for the Reno line because of how they've diluted it over the last couple of years.
It's coming back a bit, though. The 6 Pro was pretty damn solid. It had OIS again and metal frame and glass back. And then I think this 7 Pro looks pretty hot to me, but I could be wrong.
No, the 7 Pro, design-wise, it looks great. I like the notification ring and around the camera module itself.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's actually pretty nice. Design is pretty solid. It runs really well. I think as a device, though, because when I was briefed, I wasn't given a price point. And even now, I still don't know where it's truly priced at. I can't really gauge it to say, okay, Oppo, where are you putting this device price-wise? Because for certain things, in terms of performance-wise and camera, I go, okay, this is a $500 phone. And then in certain things, I go, okay, this actually feels more mid to high premium. You could go $700, and then certain times I go, this is like a $300 phone as well. So I've gotten the array of emotions around it, where I'm not exactly sure what they want to do with it, and I feel like they need to look back and take the approach that even Samsung has taken with the FE and go, we have to just designate an area for this device. Because I think the Oppo Reno is a solid line, but I think it just needs to know what is its lane, where is it going for? Because
more focus.
Yeah, more focus. Because once we have that, I think it's just more stabilized. But design-wise and what Oppo has been doing just visually on their devices has been solid. So I think it's one of those where it will get people's attention. It all depends on how the usability cuts across the board.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the Reno line started out really like affordable flagship premium mid-ranger, with like metal and glass and OIS and high-end features, and then it turned into a plastic fantastic. Design-wise, it's always been very cool with cool colors and cool patterns, and the specs have always been decent, but like design-wise, they just dropped the ball on the materials, and the prices didn't really go down. I don't know if you saw, like, I'm particularly pointing my finger at the Reno 4 and 5 series here, which were all plastic and not that cheap, and it felt like as Realme was coming in, they didn't want to upset that, and they kept the prices high somehow. But then they're learning now that I think you can't play that game. People expect more. So at least on the Reno 6 Pro, which I have, the Snapdragon 870 version that has OIS, that has metal frame and glass back, it's solid. It's well made. It feels like a almost pseudo flagship, a premium phone. But is this 7 Pro made of plastic or glass or metal? What is the materials on that?
Oh my God. They actually sent me this thing that showed the 4 layers of build. It is...
I saw that in your video. Is that glass?
It is glass. It's different layers of glass that they actually used, or different treatment levels, sorry, that they actually use for it. And it really feels solid. Like it feels like a device that you would like to hold. It is also very iPhone-esque because it could stand on its own. It's got the same level of just, flatness to it as well. So
Thanks for showing us. Hopefully I get the nice color because the black is blah. I just, the Xiaomi and BBK group phones that have black finishes, to me just don't look good enough, like not refined enough. I like that Samsung and Apple somehow still managed to pull off black. Okay, the Oppo Find N in black is really nice too.
Yeah.
But I just kind of want those blues and those reds and those greens and those, funky colors. I just like them better. So that's kind of what I'm hoping we're going to get when I get my review and it like the same color as you. Is the frame metal on this?
It feels like it's metal, but I do not want to say it's metal because
it's usually it's the antenna bands that give it away. And do you know if the camera is OIS on this? Because that's another thing that it's coming back now. There's some phones that are much more affordable that are starting to bring OIS back, which I'm really happy to see. I mean, Samsung and Apple have been pretty good about it, but others have dropped,
I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember if it is. The one thing I'll say though is anyone in the BBK group, please stop capping your front-facing cameras at 1080p.
Oh my God, no! But this is not just BBK. This is Xiaomi as well.
That's true. Yeah.
You have to go like flagship to get 4K if you're lucky on these phones, and it's like why? Like why? Especially Oppo, who was known as the selfie king for the longest time. Anyway, there are rumors of the Oppo Find X5 Pro basically telling us everything we need to know about the cameras. We have dual IMX766 like last year.
Okay.
And I think there's like potentially a 13 megapixel telephoto, but no microscope anymore. So it's an evolution. Again, it's like it's like the OnePlus 10 Pro in some ways where it's like they've kind of carried over things. At least they've not devolved it. From what it looks like. But these are camera specs, and the big news in the leak was that they're using their own ISP. So that's what I'm more excited about because...
Oh, yes.
Right? So what are we going to see here? Are we going to see the hardware being almost the same, but then the software, the processing really bringing on the goodness? Who knows?
They did... Isn't this the same ISP they announced with the Oppo Find N in December?
Yeah, it's called Mary Silicon X.
Yes. I think it's a good thing that they are trying to do that because it all depends on. If I'm not mistaken, there's a rumor I saw at least a few weeks back that says the Oppo Find X5 would have the Dimensity 9000, and then
that's right.
Then the Pro will have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. So having that ISP ensures that the imaging stays the same for both devices, and you don't 100%. Get the Samsung issue where it was a few years back where Exynos was kind of washed out and Snapdragon looked kind of better in terms of images. So if they're going to go that route, then I say yes, they definitely would be good. Plus, they can tailor it more to meet audiences much better. So I'm all for that.
It's interesting because this leak, I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's basically an Android police link, but it's in multiple places that I found it. This leak says it's a 5x zoom on the 13 megapixel tele, but I look at it and it looks like it doesn't have a periscope, it doesn't have a folded lens, so I really don't think it's going to be 5x. My gut is going to be like 3x or something, which is fine, but look, I'm more excited about the whole custom silicon ISP and what that's going to result in really at this point, because it's like, hey, like I love that the fact that we're starting to see, like the Pixel with Tensor and like we're starting to see these custom versions of parts of the SoC being farmed out or the entire SoC being custom,
Yeah, I think it makes sense it depends on how big you grow. Samsung has always had its own ISP and its own chip for a while. It's just that, we never really think of it that way. So it always makes sense. And since, the fight for number three in the market space is between Google and everybody else, everybody has to find its own competitive advantage. Yes, you could use a Snapdragon chipset, but certain things you want to keep in house, whether it's the ISP, the APUs, the NPUs, those kind of things, where you can go, okay, fine, we can just create these little parts. And Qualcomm, since your chip can talk to anything, that's great. Let us do what we can do well here.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't think the Oppo Find N, the little foldable, has the Mary Silicon.
No, I don't think so.
I thought it was. Didn't they have a bigger folding phone before that?
No, this is their first.
This is their first. There was definitely a phone announced with the Mary Silicon, though. You're right. Or was it? Oh no, wait. It was Vivo, right? Vivo has custom silicon for their ISP.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. So anyway, we'll see. The bottom line is I'm excited about the custom ISP stuff. Sorry, I don't know. I'm a nerd. I also love Oppo's color science. And so this is supposed to be a Hasselblad branded phone, the Find X5 Pro. And so, does that make you cringe? Because so far we really haven't seen that deliver. And I really hope they don't mess with Oppo's color science, please and thank you.
I mean, the Hasselblad partnership has not. Okay, you know this very well. If we just go back in memory lane, remember the Huawei P10, and then the partnership with Leica for the P20 line, and how the imaging changed so drastic in one generation, and we all fell in love with it. And yes, there was fine tuning. There were things they needed to do to fix. I agree with that, but there was such a huge leap in change. Whether you liked it or not, you appreciated that they actually put some work in. This looks to me like I paid someone to sit down and stamp Hasselblad so far.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the P9 from Huawei was the first with Leica branding, and it really was a step up. And then the P10 was very evolutionary, and the P20, as you said, just really jumped up like a huge amount. And I think we're going to see this with BBK Group here. I think that we're at the P9, P10 stage of the Hasselblad branding, but slightly worse because they're only focusing on color science, not on anything else. And I think that next year or the year after, and if they don't bring that on, I'll be mad. But I'm hoping they'll bring it on, is some hardware decisions made with Leica's expertise to improve the entire system. So, slightly different sensors and lenses optimized. Like basically, how back in the grand days of Huawei when they went ahead at all, they went to Sony and said, we need a custom RYYB 40 megapixel sensor. Make it so, right? And they did.
That is so true. And,
And so we got it, right? So that's kind of what I'm hoping will happen. But, I don't know. We've talked about this with Michael and a bunch of other folks on the podcast in the last few weeks. And it's just like this, the BBK strategy right now, it's not just OnePlus. It's like even as you said, the Renos. It's like, I'm trying to identify what's going on. I see some good stuff. Oppo Find N, the Find series has been solid. Don't get me wrong, Realme's doing kick-ass job. I think they're really doing some good stuff. It's just can we be more cohesive?
Yes.
Can we orchestrate and direct a little better, please? Please.
Yeah, that overall strategy feels a bit off. But the individual showcases, I think to me, one of the things I looked at them was I looked at what Realme was doing. I go, that is great. That is a great low entry attack to market strategy. Keep doing that. And I felt that bringing OnePlus in was the American strategy.
Correct. Exactly.
Was okay.
I thought it was America, like North America and Europe because, they have both there. And that was that. But no, it's kind of murky now because now we have China. I mean, I keep forgetting they sell these phones in China.
Yeah, but to me, it's one of those things where they have, it's very simple where you have a market like the US where there is no number three in the US. Google has sold a lot of Pixels to get there, but Motorola is still technically number three, but nobody counts them as a number three right now. So, OnePlus has, you have a parent company like Oppo, you could actually push OnePlus to be in fighting distance. Plus, you still have the Indian market that you have a very big stronghold there as well.
Yep.
Where you can now juxtaposition the Indian market to being your OnePlus is your high end in India, and your Realme is now your lower end entry. But again, it feels like, honestly, this is what's happening. They need to hire us as consultants so we can actually guide this.
Absolutely. Give me the big bucks, BBK. Come on.
Done.
Pete, call me. Call Enobong. We'll work together. We'll split the profits.
Yes.
Infinix Zero 5G. You saw my unboxing. I don't know if they sent you one or not. It's their first 5G phone. And as all Infinix phones, it's great bang for the buck. But the things that are always a bit weird about these Infinix phones is that they don't have the best software and they don't get updates easily. And, of course, they don't work well in the US because the bands are really, really specialized for Africa and Eastern Europe and other markets that they're popular in. But look, I think it's nice. It's nice to see every time I get an Infinix phone, there's something about it that delights me in some way, right?
Yeah.
And this phone copies the Oppo Find X3 Pro in design, but it does so without being like a complete copycat. And it does a good job. It's a good looking phone. The only thing I would knock on this phone, and I've knocked on a lot of Infinix phones, and it's because Africa doesn't have this requirement, is no NFC, so it can't use Google Pay. But then again, Moto G doesn't have NFC either, and they're like the number 3 brand in America, as you said.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's very true. I mean, I watched the unboxing, and the thing about that device that I really like about Infinix is every time I've got an Infinix device, there's always something fresh and different. Exactly. It just feels very different, even though it's something and it's familiar, you've seen before. But it's the price point, it's how it's delivered, it's even down to the packaging. They've done a really good job of presentation going, this is good. And what I really like about it is, like you said, it's very popular in Africa. In Nigeria, it's very popular. I remember the first time I unboxed an Infinix phone, I had more Nigerians, even though I'm Nigerian, post on that video than any of my other videos, because they were like, oh, wow, this, it's an Infinix phone. But I appreciate what they do for those kind of markets, because you're coming in, you really can't afford to spend money on a Galaxy S22 Ultra or an iPhone 13 Pro Max. Like, there's just no way you're going to do that. But then you get a device because you still want to showcase what you have, right? And you can go out with your friends and they're like, oh, what's that? Infinix. Oh, okay, that looks good. Like, it looks, presentation-wise, it gives you the feeling. Plus, it still has some features that...
And great value. And it's important in those markets. You get a lot for your money. Mm-hmm. And, the only thing that I find to be a bit of a downer on this particular phone, other than the NFC, which really doesn't matter, is the display is an LCD. And you can tell, it's IPS. It's 120 hertz, but it has a lot of light bleed and the polarization, which is a little exaggerated in my video, but it's still there. And but they made a phone this summer that I didn't mention much on the podcast, and I want to kind of squeeze it in real quick. The Infinix Pro X, I think it was, Zero X Pro. That one had an OLED, and it had 108 megapixel main sensor, like a Samsung of some kind, with OIS, and it had a 5X folded periscope telephoto with OIS. That thing kicked butt. It was only a 4G phone. But man, it was premium. I don't remember how much it costs, but it was definitely in the $300 price point.
$300, like the high threes, I would say. The reason
and the camera was really good. Like, I used it, and I was just like, wow, look at what's coming out of this thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that was what I was hoping, because the way they described that device is that it wasn't really a mass market device that they were creating. It was kind of like this experimental thing, and I was hoping that was the test bed for them to kind of get into that $300 price range and say, okay, look, we're going to use this, what we've done with this device, and just kind of carry on forward. So hopefully that happens. But you're right. That device really had a lot of things that like I absolutely love. Plus the design and like
It looked so premium. It
yeah,
felt so nice.
with the back that looked like galaxy stars and stuff like that. Which
Yeah, it
that's
has
really
like that kind of sparkles or glitter vibe going. Yeah, it was
yeah.
really cool. And I just thought like, unfortunately, they sent it to me kind of a little bit after the fact, so that's why I never did a video because I didn't have time, and it was I try to kind of hit things under embargo more because it gives me more traffic. But this Infinix, the 5G one, it's a 5G phone. It's got a Dimensity 900 in it, 920, 900. I can't remember. It's
920, I think.
It's good specs. It's solid. If it had an OLED or just maybe a slightly nicer IPS 90 hertz instead of this very affordable 120 hertz panel, I would be like, yeah, this, and of course bands that work here, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think they're not interested in coming here, and they probably don't want to dilute themselves. They're a pretty small brand, so.
No, I mean it makes sense, but I do like the fact that they've opened our eyes to their devices, at least feeding out to US influencers, because normally we won't get devices like this at all. You'd be hidden somewhere.
100%. Like I had somebody pop in from one of the countries they sell it in, Philippines, I think, in my comments going, "Oh, thanks for covering that." And I was like, "You're welcome." I do like the idea of covering phones that are a little more obscure because as a smaller pub for me, it makes more sense almost than trying to hit like my Galaxy S22 video is going to have no views compared to yours or anybody who published yesterday because, like everybody's seen everything now. So, but I know that. So, if I put like a weird Redmi or Realme or an Infinix phone up there, people are like, "Oh, cool." Like my Vivo V23 video has like 180,000 views on it. Like, because there was so much interest, right? Like people were like, "Oh, this is a phone I've been looking forward to." And I was one of the first under embargo to publish. So I was like, okay, but I didn't expect it to be that popular. So,
No, that's good. That's pretty awesome though.
Let's wrap up the last quick thing. I don't know much about it, so I kind of hoping you can save me and rescue me here. The Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra 14.5-inch display on an Android tablet. Who's drunk here?
Okay, so I did see it and my hands on. I did play with it for maybe about 3 minutes or so.
And then you threw it across the room in anger.
No. See, I actually am interested in the device because of one thing. So it has a notch because it's got bigger camera sensors, and Samsung's Play is the same Play they've had because of COVID, is work from home, and I think that is a lot of where they're going with and maximizing DeX to the best ability. I just want to game on a bigger Android tablet screen. That's just me.
Okay, got it.
In general, but I do see the need. I will say this though, that I talked to a few other creators who I was asking them how the affiliates were going in terms of like, all the sales from Samsung yesterday. And a bunch of people were like, yeah, if you like a sizable amount of people bought the Tab 8 Ultra. I was like, huh? This is exactly the same thing. So I think there is some interest, and I think Samsung they've probably done the right kind of market study to say that we just need to sell X amount and get it out there. And I think that's just probably what they're aiming for, is that trying to fill that need with the work from home, because what I see with that is something they've done with the monitors, completely different department.
Yeah.
That has the ability to connect. You can have DeX to the monitor. It's got built-in Office in the monitor without anything. You can literally just take a keyboard and mouse and use Office with a wireless connection. So
it's got a little Linux box in there of some kind.
Exactly. So they're trying to go on that route of saying we'll make your work experience easier for you. And us at Samsung.
Nice. Look, I was joking. I'm always for something new and different. I just personally have a hard time wrapping my head around a tablet I have a hard time wrapping my head around the iPad Pro 12-inch or whatever, the big one. So like, to me, I need a tablet above 11 inches. I'm like, no, just because I just don't see the point. But at the same time, some people do, and that's all that matters. The iPad makes a bit more sense because as a creator, there's some great apps, and you get the pencil, and maybe that's another possibility. But with Android, I feel like If this, is a Surface, I'd be like, okay, yeah, there's a whole bunch of like Photoshop and things that take advantage of it. But you're right, games, and maybe people want to watch Netflix on a bigger screen without having to use a web browser, right? It's always a better experience in the app to watch Netflix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think the last thing is this might be the last couple of forays into pushing DeX a little bit more.
Okay.
Because that's one of the things. So there are a couple of creators I know who cover a lot of Samsung devices. One is, her name is Tao Huen. She's based out in Canada, and her DeX videos, I mean, I read the comments and people are so interested in them.
Wow.
So it seems like there is something there where at least they're trying to go, okay, maybe we can maximize it as much as possible, since Google doesn't want to do anything with Android tablets anyway. So we have to do some work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, all your social media handles and everything?
Yes. Well, thank you again for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
And if you guys want to check out any of my content or just see me blab, it is Booredatwork, Booredatwork, everywhere on the web: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, websites, you name it. Just type in Booredatwork and you'll find me there.
That's awesome. Folks, you should definitely subscribe to Enobong's YouTube channel and follow him on the socials. And you know where you can reach me on social media. I'm at Tankgirl on both Instagram and Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character, drop the vowels. If you want to chat about this podcast with me and Enobong, hit us up on Twitter. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and your feedback. And of course, there is a couple of YouTube channels you should subscribe to that are complement to this podcast. They're basically visual content to go with the podcast. And that's youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. The podcast one is the main channel, and it's basically all my unboxing videos, some hands-ons, also the audio stuff. I put the earbuds and headphones in there sometimes as well. The other channel, the Mobile Tech More channel, is kind of the supplemental stuff. So home automation, car tech, travel tech, anything that's peripheral to mobile. So check them out. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, click the little notification icon, comment. And you can comment about the podcast if you have a question. You don't want to use the social. That's totally fine. I'll answer. So find it on YouTube. Hopefully you'll be there. And then, of course, the podcast itself lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. So subscribe, tell your friends. And remember, if your app lets you review or rate the show, consider doing that. It really helps people discover the podcast. There is a Patreon. I mentioned it, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. I want to thank my patrons for helping and supporting. Podcasts are hard to monetize, so anything that's a little extra can help. And we've got some great tiers there on Patreon for you. So we've got a Discord server you can join and chat with me. We've got a video version of the podcast, comes out a day or two before the audio version. It's a little bit more raw and less edited, and you get to maybe see some of the stumbles and fun things we do in there, and get to see some visuals, the phones that we're talking about, like the Reno 7 Pro that Enobong held up earlier. So please consider helping us. I want to thank Mikkel B, who joined this week. Thank you, Mikkel, for being a new patron. Check it out, patreon.com/TNKGRL. That's patreon.com/Tankgirl. If you don't want to do Patreon and you want to help, I get it. There's another way you can help. There's a PayPal link in the show notes. So buy me a coffee, click through, put a little donation in there and help me out. I'd appreciate it. I like a good coffee before my show. It wakes me up. So anyway, I also want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible is been with us forever, and they're great. If you're a bookworm like me and you love to read, you already know about Audible. They're like the premier platform for audiobooks. Basically, I like to read, but my eyes are often tired, and I just rather listen to somebody read me a book. So that's where Audible comes in. So if I'm on a plane, it's too dark, I just don't want to fire up a screen. I just listen. If I'm driving on a long road trip and I need to be attentive, but I also need to be entertained, I listen to a book on Audible. It's great. So they have a ton of selection. They have books read by the authors, which I really like. They have shorter content, and they have some podcasts. Basically, there's a bit of everything there for everyone. The deal is simple. You get a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a book if you stay or not. I think you'll stay because you'll love it. And if you do, it helps me and it helps Audible. So consider doing that. audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So thanks again to Audible, and thanks again to you, Enobong, for being my guest.
Thank you very much. It's always been a pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll have you on at some point in the future for sure. And folks, we'll have a show next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.